So some personal challenges that I've had in working with children over the years, I've learned that a part of building rapport is also building respect for the client and the family. But that sometimes can be quite challenging. Sometimes you will have children or adolescents that can be quite disrespectful to you in how you're trying to engage them. A lot of times they don't trust you, and adults are very just not nice to them in general, and they've learned to really build up strong distrust for them. So coming alongside of them and helping them understand that you care can be very difficult. Care with boundaries. So that can be very challenging, but once you're able to kind of work through and kind of break through that barrier, you really can see a new and different side of that child. And those families, in fact. And those can be sometimes the most rewarding ones, are the ones that you kind of broke through those walls of distrust. I would say also, especially the older you get, but power struggles. So, you can run into what I would call a power struggle with a client, in that you set a boundary, no, you can't do this, and they say, yes, I can. And you really fight each other on that. And so helping the client understand that you're not there to force them to do something, but that you're there to kind of teach them skills and to come alongside of them and help them work past whatever frustration they're dealing with, or if you're in the school, a frustration of not being able to get up and walk around and a teacher not allowing you to do that, and what that might mean, or even working to advocate for the client. So if you're in a community setting where you can make an adjustment and teach them on a greater scale of what they can achieve in talking to someone or presenting what the problem is for them, instead of just reacting emotionally to a situation, and kind of bringing those things together for them to kind of teach them those kind of skills in order to eventually advocate for themselves. So that's an important piece as well. And then also, oftentimes, especially with children and adolescents, you oftentimes have to think outside of the box. So you will sometimes try something and it will start working, and then it will stop working. And then you got to try something else, and you got to start it, and it might stop working. And you have to kind of really move and go back and forth. And it's very much of a waxing and waning in your interventions with them and what you're teaching them. So I would say on many skills of roles that the students will be providing, that really will be the case. So as you kind of hit walls per se, you kind of have to move and change with how you're working with a client and what you're kind of presenting to them and what you're trying to teach them ultimately.
Some personal challenges I've had with working with children is, first and foremost, I am a verbal processor, and many children are not. They like stimuli. So what I've had to do is learn a bit more about trying to gain their trust, as I said earlier, but also to try to gain something that could be relative for them. So for example, if you are indeed interested in working with children, I would highly recommend that you become an associate play therapist, because therein lies a way to really get down to the level of a child to help connect with them. For example, in my case, I often will use card tricks or some magic tricks. And by using that, I launch from that as the child gets excited and enthralled and entertained. I may launch into the idea of talking about deception in the child's life, knowing that there are things that may look safe, may look tasty, may look appropriate, but in reality, the deception behind it could be very harmful. So that's just one example. I also will try to incorporate some Bible characters, and not necessarily read them from Scripture, but put it in their language. So, like example, I would say to them, did you know that in the old ancient days of the Scriptures, there was a little boy who became king at the age of 8? What would you do if you became king at your age? What would you do if you had the power to make some changes in your life in your home, in your environment, and you were king, what would you do? And the answer that they may give you could be quite revealing. And using that as an example to say, you know, there was a really true king. His name was Josiah in the Bible, who was at age 8 became king. So a lot of other character references from Scripture could be very, very helpful.
One of probably the biggest challenges, especially when I was newer in the field, was looking at children more as their chronological age and expecting them to have certain skills and abilities that really don't apply to all children. And so I think taking a stance of meeting the child where they're at, spending some time, getting to really know who they are, what they're capable of, and not making their relationship with me and as we work together frustrating for them. And so now, after all these years, being able to break things down into manageable pieces for the child is really important. And then continually looking at how the child's doing, and if they appear frustrated or stuck, looking back at myself and saying, how can I do this differently to help the child move forward and improve without it being frustrating? How do I make this a good experience for the child? The other real piece is just keeping an eye on what I consider my role to be. We have so many different roles with children, whether it's being a counselor, a mentor, their teacher. They have friends, they have siblings, they have parents, and all those roles have different purposes in their lives. And so I think to really remind myself often what my role is with the child and not allow myself to get moved into a different role, either by people around the child, their support system, or by the child themselves. Because I've worked in residential settings where the child is away from their family for long periods of time, I've had multiple experiences where one of the children will come up and grab my hand and look at me and say, "Will you be my mom?" And just knowing that that's not my role, and really watching myself and reflecting inside of myself, what does that statement do to me emotionally? And then how do I address it well with the child without feeling like I'm pushing away or rejecting them?